So I was looking on musing.io, our version of Medium, I guess, and or Quora would be a better comparison. So Mozilla asks, in which country wealth distribution is fairer than others? So I guess a little bit better grammar is asking, which countries have the fairest distribution of wealth. So there's a lot of different ways to look at that. And what I did was I looked at the Gini coefficient. So I went over to the CIA World Factbook, and they maintain a list that has various periods of updating. And I just downloaded the whole list of 157 different political entities. Not all of them are actually countries. So it has like the West Bank as one of them, which is not a country unto itself, at least not really. So I downloaded that, threw that in Excel. But what the Gini coefficient measures is, how skewed the distribution of wealth is amongst the population. So if the people can make different money, but if it's heavily weighted to one side or the other, you'll end up with different shaped curves. And the coefficient describes how steep that curve is. So the higher the Gini coefficient, the more unequal the wealth is distributed. I mean, no measurement is perfect, but it's a decent one. So I downloaded this whole list, but the problem is with these kinds of things is it's one-dimensional. It's just the distribution of wealth throughout that population. But the thing you have to remember is that the natural state of humankind is, wandering naked in, East Africa somewhere. So, if we're talking about distributing wealth, you have to actually have wealth to distribute. And whether that amount is distributed or, just the natural result of private activity, all those things you have to keep in mind. So like Ukraine, has a very low Gini coefficient, meaning that most people have, roughly the same level of wealth, but, they don't have a whole lot of wealth. So that's not a good comparison. Same with Kazakhstan. So what I did after that was I looked at GDP per capita. And, here's another list of all the countries and the the GDPs per capita. And this is in purchasing power parity, which is an attempt to equalize, different currencies and different costs of living in different places. So at the top of the list here, we can see Qatar, Macau, Luxembourg, Singapore, Brunei, Ireland. So the these are all wealthier countries. The U.S. is there, Hong Kong, Switzerland, Norway, UAE, Saudi Arabia. So then what I wanted to look at was, how does the Gini coefficient, if you have a low Gini coefficient and a high purchasing power parity per capita, then what are we left with? And that's this list here. And so these are countries that have a Gini coefficient of less than 35, which is, relatively low, and purchasing power above 30,000. So, in the grand scheme of things, that's relatively high. So here we've got, Slovakia, Slovenia, Sweden, Czechia, Belgium, Norway, Germany, Finland, Iceland, Malta, Denmark, France, Switzerland, Australia, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Austria, Ireland, Italy, Canada, UK, and Cyprus. So these are the countries where people are actually making some money, and that is relatively, homogenous in terms of income. So, is 30,000 the right number? Well, I don't know. Let's look at greater than 40,000. And this is in US dollar equivalents. So now we have Sweden coming out on top. Belgium, Norway, Germany, Finland, Iceland, Denmark. So the top 7, 6 of them are Scandinavian. If we include Iceland, which is ethnically Scandinavian. Germany is the only outlier there. And then we have Switzerland, Austria, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Austria, Ireland, Canada. So very Europe centric. Canada being an outlier there, Australia being another outlier. Of course, these are, descendants of Europe. But again, you have to consider these countries. Most of these are very small countries. I mean, Canada is probably one of the, by land area is definitely one of the biggest. But population-wise has, I don't know what the current population is, 30 million, something like that. Ireland's a small country. Austria's, I think, 20, 30 million. Luxembourg's tiny. Netherlands is pretty small. Australia, I was big, again, like Canada, large landmass, relatively small population. And then another thing you have to think about is, well, what are you going to do with this list? So these countries have, fairly even distributions of wealth, and there is wealth to distribute. But who are the people living there? So, in the Scandinavian countries, the populations are extremely homogenous. Even with the recent immigration that they've had, still, the vast majority are, the same ethnic groups, same language groups. So, if you move there, does that mean you're going to be making the same kind of money? Not necessarily. So, a larger, more diverse population is probably going to be something like Australia. Germany has a large population. So, we're probably looking at those two. Maybe throw in Canada there, as far as, a place that is, available to people who are not part of that homogenous group. So those would be my top three, as far as, the real meaning behind that question of, where is wealth, most evenly distributed in various countries. So Germany, Australia, Canada. And the rest I would, disqualify as being too homogenous or too small. Anyway, hope that helps.